Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News this week, is rescheduling of cannabis dead? The new administration's interim pick to lead the DEA, Derek Maltz, is an outspoken prohibitionist of cannabis, and many reports say the positive movement over the past few years is a non-starter now. And Trump's pick for Attorney General, Pam Bondi, gets grilled on Capitol Hill over her stance on federal reform and dances around the questions of rescheduling and/or legalization. And a new poll concludes that 96% of regular cannabis users believe the DEA is biased on rescheduling of that plant medicine. In Virginia, NORML holds its two-day cannabis conference, headlined by our friend Morgan Fox as its keynote speaker.
We're starting to see a little bit of movement. We're starting to see more supportive statements from politicians. We're starting to see a lot more media coverage.
Plus, Indiana lawmakers start to haggle about how an adult use program would work in that Hoosier state, and they're just starting that process of reform in Indiana. Meanwhile, in another state that has already approved adult use, Minnesota, they can't get started at all while the illicit market thrives. And what will Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's resignation mean to that country's legal cannabis market? All that and Coast to Coast reports on cannabis news on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto. Next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cannabis Coast to Coast News, PCMTV's weekly production of cannabis news from California to Massachusetts. I'm Alaina Pinto. The best way to follow our weekly coverage of the fight to end cannabis prohibition is to download the PCMTV app from Google Play or the App Store. You'll also, with this, get access to the past 4 years of shows documenting the road to reform. It's free, and you can sign up right now by scanning the QR code on the screen. Just in case you haven't heard, there's a new president in the White House, and his name is Donald Trump. The Republicans will dictate any movement in Congress over the next few years on federal reform. And this week, the new president's picks for Attorney General Pam Bondi and the interim director of the DEA, Derek Maltz, are not supporters of any changes to the existing laws, and neither seems too keen on making any changes a priority at the federal level. What the feds can't do is ignore the fact that 24 states have adult use programs, 40 have decriminalized it, and have medical programs, and 70% of the populace wants legalization. This week, Virginia correspondent Joe Parsons talked with Morgan Fox, the political director of NORML, about the challenge for change ahead.
Where do we go from here? And, we're seeing that there's, considerably more pushback in some of the states that have yet to legalize cannabis or have yet to regulate sales. In Virginia, there's definitely a lot of opposition to actually regulating sales, despite the fact that the people and majority of lawmakers supported making cannabis legal for adults. And so that's definitely something that our folks are going to be working on when they're doing lobbying, but something that is going to be a top-line conversation when we're talking with advocates at the actual conference.
Morgan was the keynote speaker at Virginia NORML's annual Lobby Days conference, and later on, we will have his report from that event. For the rest of what's going on in Washington, D.C., here's Andrew Behringer.
I'm Andrew Behringer with the Washington, D.C. report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The Drug Enforcement Administration has a new acting administrator, Derek S. Maltz, sparking controversy within cannabis circles. With over 28 years of DEA experience before retiring in 2014, Maltz steps into a leadership role that's immediately drawn criticism. He's replacing former Administrator Ann Milgram and bringing a decidedly tough stance on drug policy. Maltz has been vocal about his opposition to current cannabis legislation, arguing that the Biden administration is placing politics above public safety. His appointment comes at a critical moment with the ongoing debates about cannabis rescheduling and current regulation creation. Some people have described Maltz as a drug war hawk, suggesting his views are significantly out of step with the mainstream public opinion on cannabis policy. Most notably controversial are Maltz's claims linking high THC levels to increased school shooting incidences, a statement that's already raising eyebrows among policy experts like myself. The DEA has currently paused in-person hearings on cannabis rescheduling pending an administrative appeal, a move that underscores the complex legal landscape Maltz is currently going to inherit. Well, that's the Washington, D.C. report. I'm Andrew Behringer, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. See you next week.
There's an interesting story out of Connecticut this week that every grower should know about. Back in 2020, TheraPlant in Watertown, Connecticut, had a fire that destroyed parts of its grow facility and just under 1,000 plants in that grow room. This week, a federal judge ruled that the insurance policy did not cover the plants destroyed in the fire and the subsequent income from the sale of those plants. It just covered the physical structure of TheraPlant's grow house. So for any growers out there, make sure you ask your insurance agent about crop insurance, not just building insurance. And this is happening right now in California, where they are still recovering from the devastation from the wildfires in the greater LA area. And now a dispensary in California called Embark has started a GoFundMe campaign to help out cannabis-specific businesses. While millions of dollars are being donated by major corporations, sports leagues, and philanthropists, this fund will go directly to cannabis operators. You can donate at their GoFundMe.com page for the United Cannabis Community Fire Relief Fund. They have a goal of just $90,000, and they are 85% of the way to meeting that goal. Any donation is appreciated and tax deductible. For more from California, here's Dina Nagib.
I'm Dina Nagib, Principal Consultant at Grass Goddess Consulting, here to give you the latest developments in California for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. A new marijuana trade group in California representing the state's largest retailers has been formed to address the looming potential excise tax hike and to create new legislation replacing Proposition 64, which many in the industry describe as flawed. The California Cannabis Operators Association launched with 17 members, including the Catalyst Cannabis Co., Embark, and Stizzy, which operate about 75 dispensaries combined. The California market is on the verge of imploding, and it's encouraging to see license holders come together, but time will tell if change can be made. On the research front, the University of California in San Diego released results from a study on cannabis smoke exposure to children in their homes. Measurements were made on air particles in the home, and THC and its metabolites were measured in children's urine, demonstrating increased levels when the parent or guardian reported smoking cannabis. There are limitations in this study, and it stated that many were also tobacco smokers, increasing the amount of overall smoking. The results finding indications of THC in urine from secondhand smoke are notable, and further studies are necessary. That's it for the California news. This is Dina Nagib with Grass Goddess Consulting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
The nation has been stuck on 24 adult use states for over a year now, with Ohio being the last one to open up legal sales for adults. Minnesota actually ratified their laws to open adult use market before Ohio, but like so many early stage states, writing the regulations and setting up the rules has been delayed time and time again. Now the illicit market is reaping the benefits in that state, and over $600,000 worth of cannabis has been seized by law enforcement in 2024 for jumping the gun. Despite a fledgling restrictive medical program that started in 2015, Minnesota didn't want to follow the model of Ohio and Arizona by immediately giving licenses to the existing medical dispensaries to sell to adults. And now they are standing still. No such issues in Nevada or with the tribal nations who are open for business and reaping the tax benefits. Here's Tina Tasaka with the Nevada and Tribal Lands Cannabis Report.
I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies, and this is the Nevada and Tribal Nations Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Many states offer the cannabis industry an FA card, facilities agent, Colorado, Arizona, Oregon, Nevada, and others. Most charge a fee around $150 for a 2-year term. Well, in Nevada, the FA card is a little different. There are 8 categories with the card, and many cannabis employees are required to have multiple cards. This becomes very expensive if you need 4 or 5 cards just to do your job. Here comes the Chamber of Cannabis and upcoming 2025 legislative focus. They are working on getting this modified, specifically to consolidate agent card categories. In the long run, this will reduce significant expenses for the employee, encourage cross-training, and retain talent. See more related legislation and what the Chamber of Cannabis can bring to you or your company in Nevada. www.cofclv.org. 12 tribes advance equity in the cannabis industry. The ICIA continues to champion opportunities for the indigenous people in the cannabis industry, paving the way for meaningful change in 2025 and beyond. In 2024, the Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association welcomed 12 tribal government members, strengthening their mission to expand access to plant medicine and empower indigenous communities. The ICIA made strides globally, speaking at the International Cannabis Business Conference in Berlin and the Andean Hemp and Cannabis Trade Forum in Peru. ICIA's 3rd annual National Indigenous Cannabis Policy Summit in Washington, D.C. emphasized tribal sovereignty in cannabis and hemp industries, while regional efforts included Wisconsin's 2nd annual Cannabis Summit and launching the Wisconsin Tribal Task Force on Cannabis, and another is coming up at the end of February. Advocacy also extended to federal policy, with ICIA amplifying Indigenous voices in the DEA's cannabis rescheduling discussions. That's it for the Nevada highlights and tribal nations. I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies and Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
The state legislature of Indiana is starting to move towards a bill that would open up an adult use market in that state. They have the support of their governor for a medical program, but the Republican-controlled state legislature has always blocked any movement. That might be changing. The lobbyist group Safe and Regulated Indiana formed last year and is working with a Republican representative, Heath Van Natter from Kokomo. The congressman is introducing a bill that would fully legalize the adult use of cannabis and establish a regulatory framework for sale in that very conservative state. Van Natter said his bill will address the reality of its presence in our society with a responsible conservative solution. Indiana is surrounded by states that have some kind of legal cannabis market operational, including Illinois, where they continue to deal with the difficult question of driving under the influence of cannabis and determining how impaired that driver is. Mark Allen, the Cologne guy, is our new Illinois correspondent, and he's fired up over some of the controversies emerging over this challenging question.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mark Allen, and this is Bird. We're reporting from Illinois for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. University of Illinois Chicago made the news this week, or actually recently, but not for good reasons. They've actually been helping the state prosecute cannabis DUIs. How they've been doing this, though? But they've been doing it with flawed test results. They were recently audited, and that auditing agency declared that literally they had flawed blood testing or nonconformities. So bad, so they literally said that they had a failure to follow scientific standards. Do better, University of Illinois Chicago, because now there's 1,600 people that are in jail or have been convicted of a cannabis DUI because of your flawed testing blood results. Not only is that bad, it's so bad that March of last year, they knew about it, and then they waited 2 months to even tell the state. So then further examination into it found out that not only did they know about it then, they knew about it back in 2021. And nothing's happened about it. So that's been paused and discontinued while all these people sit in jail and can't get jobs and can't move on with their lives. University of Illinois Chicago is doing this, and nobody's done anything about it. There's no accountability for anybody in the state or those testing organizations. Unfortunately, we got to keep moving forward. That's how it is. On other news, that's, I guess, not so good. There's been a lot of cannabis grow shops in Chicagoland last year or so that have been closing down. I'm going to blame it straightly on, specifically on the economy and what's been going on the last 4 years. Numerous shops have closed down. The ones that are still open have to move or have actually had to move to smaller, locations that are lower in rent so they can afford to stay in business. Those shops that are staying in business here attribute their sales to seeds, clones, and soil. They say that everything else can pretty much be bought on the internet, and that's what people are doing. So that sums up the Illinois Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Mark Allen, checking out. Thanks for tuning in.
That will wrap up the A block for this week's edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News. But when we come back, we will go down to Virginia and check in with Joe Parsons again, who covered the NORML Cannabis Conference down there this weekend.
Ready to take your craft to the next level? Imagine faster extractions, purer products, and more profits. Sounds good, right? At Pure 5 Extraction, we've revolutionized cannabis extraction with our game-changing technology. No solvents, no heat, just the cleanest, most natural process on the market. Whether you're a boutique grower or a large-scale operation, Pure 5 has the tools to elevate your business worldwide. Visit pure5extraction.com today. Pure 5 Extraction, because your plants deserve the best.
Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This is the B block, or second section of our weekly show. I'm Alaina Pinto. The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, or NORML, is the oldest lobbyist group for change in cannabis laws, and it was formed in 1970 thanks to a $5,000 grant from Hugh Hefner's Playboy Foundation. Now, with 135 chapters around the country, NORML has led the way across the country and the world of changing cannabis laws. This weekend in Virginia, that state's chapter held a 2-day conference in Richmond to galvanize once again the effort to bring an adult use market to that Commonwealth. You might remember that last year, the legislature passed a bill that landed on their governor's desk only to be vetoed by Glenn Youngkin. Now, with that governor in his final year, the movement begins again. Joe Parsons was on hand at the conference, and here's his report.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection, and this is the Virginia Cannabis Report on Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Today I'm in Richmond, Virginia. I'm very proud to be at the NORML 2025 Cannabis Conference. This conference is sponsored by Rise Cannabis and, of course, the Virginia chapter of NORML. The purpose of this conference is to not only bring education and resources to the state of Virginia, but to talk about the upcoming 119th Congress and what the plans are to get legalization actually rolling, not just here in Virginia, but across the nation. The keynote speaker today was, of course, Morgan Fox.
The fact that the grassroots folks are really going hard on Republican lobbying is a great sign. We're starting to see a little bit of movement. We're starting to see more supportive statements from politicians. We're starting to see a lot more media coverage in Indiana, which is fantastic. And I think that actually helps drive a lot of the conversation and helps to motivate lawmakers. If they start seeing this coming up in the news over and over again, and especially if they're seeing members of NORML chapters or other advocates speaking about this actively, and then the people that are being quoted in these stories are going and talking to lawmakers, connecting the name with the face, and actually hearing from people, as opposed to it just being a news blur, we start to see real action.
Honored to be speaking with Tamara Netzel, and I want to hear about this amazing book that she's written. So Tamara, what can you tell us about it?
Absolutely. So this is my second book, and it's named Humans of Cannabis in a Renaissance of Hope. And that title really means, we're talking about Governor Youngkin, okay? And if you will, some of you may know that he has been known to say very little about cannabis, but what he has said, he has claimed that he has never met anybody who consumes cannabis and they're successful. So this book really is the answer to Governor Youngkin saying that. There's 51 stories in here of successful people who consume cannabis.
Awesome.
And, yeah, and they're all successful. They're entrepreneurs, patients, everyday people that come to this plant, and the diverse people come.
It has been an awesome day here at the 2025 Virginia NORML Cannabis Conference. We look forward to the future, and we hope that eventually, not only here in Virginia, but the rest of the country will eventually seek coast-to-coast decriminalization, not rescheduling. So, keep hope alive, and until next time, everyone, stay lifted.
Colorado and Washington state are the two oldest legal cannabis markets in the country. Now in Colorado, there has been a major change in one of the state's oldest trade associations. The marijuana industry group has ceased operations after 15 years of advocacy in the Mountain High state. Our Colorado correspondent is Xavier Jaillet, and he is the chair of the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, and his report takes a look at what's next in his state.
I'm Xavier Jaillet, chairman of the Colorado chapter of the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce and a non-attorney consultant with the McDonald Hopkins law firm. And here's what's happening in Colorado cannabis this week. On January 22nd, lawmakers introduced to the Senate SB 25076. Senate Bill 076 seeks to limit sales in both the emerging psychedelic industry in Colorado, but also the existing adult use cannabis industry. Now, on the cannabis side, SB 076 first proposes to limit the sale of THC products containing 10% or more THC to adults over the age of 26. Similarly, SB 076 seeks to reduce or eliminate the use of flavored inhalable products, looking specifically at things like joints and vape pens, alleging that the flavoring in these products makes them more attractive to children. And finally, SB 076 proposes maximizing or limiting the serving size, the maximum serving size, of inhalable products to 500 milligrams. Now, this would include flour in any form, right? Loose flour, joints, but also things like vape pens. And as you might imagine, the Colorado cannabis industry is vehemently opposed to the propositions in SB 076, mainly pointing to the fact that voters initially allowed the adult use industry to be legalized here in Colorado under the premise that cannabis should truly be regulated like alcohol. And alcohol, of course, is only available to adults over the age of 21. And there's no concerns about branding, flavoring, and things like that, and alcohol being attractive to children. Now, the final component of SB 076 that's relevant to cannabis is that it seeks to open up Colorado's social equity program, really focused on providing opportunities to underrepresented and minority populations that want to participate in cannabis, opening that to all businesses, not just cannabis. Which is, of course, ironic considering the program is entirely funded by revenue from marijuana sales here in Colorado. So it'll be interesting to see how this bill progresses in the Senate. I don't personally expect it to make it very far, but it is a sign that, here, 12 years after adult use sales first started in Colorado, there are still challenges to those laws, in that there are still proponents looking to limit the amount of sales that are able to be made. That's it for the Colorado Cannabis Report this week. I'm Xavier Jaillet, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Insurance regulations on cannabis are just one of the requirements for any grow facility in the industry to start. Another regulation that restricts marketing for the industry is advertising. And while this show encourages ads from cannabis businesses, the messaging has to be more informational than a call to action. And now in Arizona, they are changing the rules again. Here's Karen Black with that story.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. A Phoenix company has reason to celebrate, millions of them, and did so in iconic fashion. BBK Tobacco and Foods, which distributes raw rolling papers, was recently awarded $8.7 million for theft of its intellectual property and copyright infringement. The case centered on counterfeit rolling papers manufactured in India that copied the legendary brand. To celebrate the victory, John Kesselman, founder and creator of Raw, literally rolled up the lawsuit and smoked it. He stated, and I quote, "This victory is about more than money. It's about protecting what RAW stands for: quality, authenticity, and respect for our customers." End quote. A new House bill is fanning the flames of a long-standing feud between Arizona's cannabis and hemp industries. The measure aims to crack down on cannabis ads, especially those that might catch kids' attention. It's supported by the Arizona Dispensaries Association. However, both the Hemp Industry Trade Association and Arizona NORML oppose it. At issue is the bill's definition of marijuana, which includes hemp, and would severely restrict advertising of hemp-derived products, including but not limited to CBD. HEDA Executive Director Sully Sullivan claims the bill torpedoes the hemp industry, while NORML's AJ Jacobs went so far as to say the bill's primary function is to allow dispensaries to monopolize the market. In the other chamber, a Senate bill aims to fix, rather than exacerbate, a problem. It proposes to correct the word may to shall in a 2021 law so that the Arizona Biomedical Research Center can finally issue grants from the Medical Marijuana Fund for FDA-approved cannabis research. The three-letter word has held up millions for 3 years and delayed Arizona scientists from researching cannabis as a potential treatment for autism, epilepsy, PTSD, and pain. That's all for this week's Arizona Report. I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
That'll do it for the B block this week. But in our final section, we go back to the Midwest. You might remember we introduced you to our newest correspondent from Oklahoma last week. Her name is Kimmie Cannabis, and we'll have her report next as Cannabis Coast to Coast continues after this.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Now, let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weejits filtration system. What? The Weejits.com, Weejits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. The guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. Now, add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weejits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind.
Welcome back to the C Block, or final section of Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaina Pinto. The Raw Rolling Papers brand won a trademark infringement lawsuit that this weekend was awarded $8.7 million in damages. The guilty party here is Ames Group USA and its subsidiaries. That includes Florida One Wholesale and Brocone Organic. U.S. District Judge Brenda Wexler from Nevada made the ruling that the design and packaging were both too similar to the Raw brand, the #1 rolling paper company in the world. No wonder their CEO, Josh Kesselman, is always smiling in photos. I would too. Next up, Oklahoma and Kimmie Cannabis.
I'm Kimmie Cannabis from Can I Talk About It with Oklahoma Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Oklahoma lawmakers are currently debating House Bill 1750, a measure that could have far-reaching effects on the state's medical cannabis community. If enacted, the bill would take effect on November 1st, 2025, prohibiting pregnant women with medical marijuana licenses from using cannabis while knowingly pregnant. Advocates warn that the legislation may have unintended and harmful consequences. Jed Green, founder of ORCA, Oklahomans for Responsible Cannabis Access, criticized the bill for undermining medical autonomy. Cannabis offers vital relief from pregnancy-related challenges like morning sickness, Green said. Cannabinoids are naturally present in the breast milk, highlighting their role in human health. Decisions about cannabis use during pregnancy should remain between patients and their doctors, not dictated by lawmakers lacking expertise and understanding. Green also cautioned that the bill could disrupt families. This legislation could result in children being removed from their homes and placed into a state system already under scrutiny for failing to care for those in need. Cannabis use under medical supervision is not a valid reason to separate mothers and their children. As the legislation session resumes on February 3rd, the evolving landscape of cannabis policy in Oklahoma will remain a key topic of discussion. That will do it for the Oklahoma Cannabis Report for this week. I'm Kimmie Cannabis reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Peace, love, and all that good stuff.
In New York State this week, the Supreme Court there released a decision that the state will not be able to search licensed hemp retailers without a warrant. The case was brought by Super Smoke and Save versus the New York State Cannabis Control Board and the Sheriff's Department. This led to unannounced inspections, seizures of product, and the placing of signs on those stores saying they were selling unlicensed cannabis. Here's Jill Goldsberry with the New Jersey Cannabis Report.
I'm Jill Goldsberry with the Garden State Cannabis Report here at Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Hope you guys are doing great today. And after the week we've had, we deserve some good news. We've got some good news from New Jersey officials here that are trying to do the right thing. Okay? New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy and our Attorney General Matt Platkin announced this week that $14.5 million will be going towards violence prevention via the Community-Based Violent Intervention Grant. And a portion of that money, a large portion of that money comes from the adult cannabis sales tax. And the other portion of that is coming from the CREAM fund. So that is a great thing. The money will be used for 27 different organizations through the fund. And it will be used for social advocacy and violence prevention programs, obviously. In other news, Heading, New Jersey recently had their first I'm not sure if it's the first, but they recently held their Legacy to Legal forum this week. And you can read more about that on headingnewjersey.com. Go check them out. In other news, wrestler Ric Flair has a brand new cannabis partnership with Cannabis and launched this week. So you could find those products in their stores. So if you want to find out more about the exact stores that they're in, I would advise you to go check out headingnewjersey.com for that information as well, because they are the ones that reported it. I'm Jill Goldsberry with the Garden State Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, and I'll see you on the next report. Thanks for watching.
The state of South Carolina has some of the most strict laws on cannabis in the country. Now, a pro-cannabis senator there, Tom Davis, has introduced a law to create a medicinal program that would be distributed by 3 pharmacies in designated counties. The whole operation would be under the Department of Public Health and Safety. This bill has a long way to go, but any movement in that conservative state is seen as a win for advocates. Now let's check in on Ohio with Christina Brisson. The Ohio Cannabis Report is sponsored by Yellow Labs, now in 40 dispensaries in that state and now available at select stores in Massachusetts.
In Loveland, Ohio, Emily and Mark seek to deepen their bond through intimacy. They turn to Yellow Labs Rose Oil Massage Cream with delivery technology, promising enhanced pleasure and connection. The cream ignites increased sensitivity and arousal as they apply it, rekindling a shared passion. Excited by its effects, they find joy in shared closeness and moments of unity.
I'm Christina Brisson with Over the Top Renovations with your weekly Ohio Cannabis Report with Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I have 3 stories for you this week, the first of which is they are opening 5 new dispensaries in Stark County, 2 in Massillon, 2 in Canton, and 1 in Alliance. And then now the Division of Cannabis Control has opened a new cannabis service center, currently receiving about 120 calls a day. They answer questions about licenses, patient questions, non-medical, adult, and just general public questions. You can reach them at the number that's on the screen. And then my last story is in Columbus and surrounding areas, you can now have your cannabis delivered. Homegrown Cannabis Company is now offering delivery. They are open from 6 to 10 p.m. You can place your order as late as 5 p.m. It must be a minimum $50. You have to be 21 or 18 with a medical card. Really excited about having delivery in my own hometown. And that's your Ohio Cannabis Report. And this is Christina Brisson with Over the Top Renovations with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
The Ohio Cannabis Report is supported by Yellow Labs and BetterWaysToTHC.com. Search for Yellow Labs near me and find one of 40 dispensaries in Ohio carrying these amazing mists and creams.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Federal prosecutors have indicted a former executive of MSO Verano Holdings Corp. On a charge of insider trading. Anthony Marsco, a former executive vice president at the Chicago-based MSO, allegedly used privileged information regarding a pending merger of Verano and Viero Growth to collect a 6-figure profit, according to a release from the U.S. Attorney's Office. And in other news, iSpire authorized the repurchase of up to $10 million in shares of the marijuana vaping hardware company's common stock in the next 24 months. iSpire Technology shares trades on the NASDAQ exchange under the stock ticker ISPR. It's trading around $4.50 and it's curling off the bottom. You're going to want to keep an eye on this as it's setting up and it's looking really good. So trade smart, lock in those profits. And that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Doug Miller.
And finally tonight, one of the most recognized faces in cannabis is Snoop Dogg, who seems to be everywhere these days. And now the rapper and media personality performed at the Trump inauguration, upsetting many in the Black community. 4 years ago, Snoop was not a big fan of Trump until he commuted the sentence of the founder of his death row record label, Harry O, or Michael Harris. That's when Snoop did an about-face and decided that Trump wasn't such a bad guy after all. As boxing promoter Don King used to say, only in America. That's this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. We will see you next time. Remember to consume responsibly.
I think I messed up. Did you know there's a place that covers all the cannabis news you need? Welcome to Pro Cannabis Media, your go-to for all things cannabis. PCM is the CNBC of weed, bringing you the latest news and talk shows with a twist. We've got 16 state correspondents and multimedia journalists from around the US and Canada.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with Big Green Distribution with the Missouri Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Amy Carter from Michigan Weedsters.
Andrew Behringer here reporting from Washington, D.C.
Debbie Fazy with the Canadian Toke of the Week.
It all started back in 2018 when founder Jimmy Young kicked off the In the Weeds podcast. His mission? Documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition. Fast forward to today and we've got Cannabis Coast to Coast with Alaina Pinto, delivering the nation's only TV-style cannabis news show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast, PCM TV's weekly roundup of industry news from California to New York. I'm Alaina Pinto.
As of August 2024, PCM has racked up over 1.2 million views and 14.5 million impressions on our YouTube channel. With 15,000 subscribers and growing, our reach is spreading like wildfire. PCM's website, YouTube, Rumble, Discord, Roku, Twitch, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and even our very own PCM TV app. Get your cannabis news fix with Pro Cannabis Media. We're here to keep you informed and entertained. Stay tuned and stay lifted.